So we mute ourselves, right? Bhavna, we mute ourselves.
Yes. Good afternoon. Welcome to the OPPI Digital Knowledge Series in collaboration with IPA and IDMA. Thank you to all the attendees who have joined us this afternoon. Over the last few months, pharma companies have largely focused on the crisis by facilitating access to medicines, supporting HCPs and healthcare institutions, enabling employees to operate in a new environment, and more than anything, responding to our patient needs in every manner possible. As we step into the recovery mode, reevaluating the future of work will be the key. An agile, iterative, patient-centered approach will demand that pharma companies redraw their customer engagement blueprints against the backdrop of a digital transformation. The agile ways of working will allow companies to determine how they most effectively match their sales force to the market, paired with the right digital investment to enable newer and productive engagement models. According to PwC, Salesforce teams will continue to play a critical role in the future engagement models. Combinations of face-to-face engagements with digital interactions will set the trend for productive and effective field force engagements. In other words, it is the coming of age of the field force in our industry. So what lies ahead? How do pharma companies determine the right mix? As the saying goes, content is king, but engagement is queen, and the queen rules. Let me welcome Vikrant Shrotriya, Managing Director and Corporate Vice President, Novo Nordisk India Limited, to set the context for this journey of a productive field force engagement. Over to you, Vikrant.
Thank you, Bhavna, and good afternoon to everyone. I would like to welcome each one of you to this very interesting webinar, part of the OPPI Digital Knowledge Series, which is pan-industry initiative in collaboration with IPA and IDMA. What makes this webinar interesting is its relevance. As leaders, the topmost question in our mind is the manner in which we are going to effectively lead our teams, especially our frontline, and turn the tide in our favor against all adversities. And the second, what are the expectations of the doctors and HCPs? And is our field force equipped to respond to those expectations and against the backdrop of digital transformation? Talking about digital transformation, I must say there are decades when nothing happens, but then there are weeks when decades happen. A lot has changed during the COVID for industry as well as to the pharma. And with the epidemic progression, what I have seen is that digital progression has happened simultaneously. Telemedicine, which was in rounds of talks by Government of India for years together, just got approved within 2 days of the lockdown on 25th of March. Advent of digital adoption, tools which were actually esoteric, they were unknown. Zoom, GoToWebinar, Click Meeting, Livestorm, Webinar Ninja, all has undergone a very rapid penetration in healthcare. Once a hard sell, telemedicine is a boom in today's market with so many tools around. So there is no better time than now in terms of redefining, in terms of the way we do business, realigning roles, responsibilities, enabling processes, tools, data, skilling, reskilling, and training our workforce in order to respond to this digital changeover. Tomorrow's word, let me tell you, is going to be the blended mix of channels, and the pharma marketing playbook will need another chapter to it. The strategic use of digital tool, along with the understanding of the digital mindset of the patients and healthcare professionals, will emerge as the key ingredient of what you really call is the new marketing concoction. We need to step up. The industry will play a significant role in terms of bridging these expectations and in supporting these expectations. In all this, transforming role of medical representative is very, very evident. With telehealth knowledge and experience on the high, and doctors becoming more digitally savvy, MRs will need to reinvent themselves and create value in the interaction as well as engagement with HCPs. IPSOS, our knowledge partner for today, has just concluded a very interesting survey of HCPs where we will actually see varying as well as evolving expectations of the HCPs towards pharma companies and in the manner actually they would like to engage with us in the future. As a marketeer, we all know what is the value of KYC, know your customers. Our customers' preferences, our customer knowledge, and the requirements are changing. And we need to respond and meet those requirements to increase the productivity and efficiency of the organization. And I believe that this particular webinar will help us in this process. It will make us think in the most optimal manner, utilization of the field and finding a right balance of this offline and face-to-face digital mix aligned with the overarching, you can see the strategic objective of the organization. So without much ado, let me welcome Monica Gangwani, Executive Director and Service Line Leader, Healthcare IPSOS. With almost 3 decades of experience in healthcare, she brings a very rich and diversified experience in multitude of functions, starting actually as a medical rep. So the right person to talk about doctors changing behavior and the need, as well as the response of the industry through our frontline. She has worked in several pharmaceutical industry before moving on to research and consultancy domain. As I hand over to Monica, I must remind our audience that there will be an exclusive Q&A after the session. And if you have got any questions on the session on Monica, please text it or write in the Q&A box. This session will be moderated by my executive committee colleague Milind Thate, who is the member of OPPI. Milind is Managing Director of P&G Health Limited. Milind has a wealth of pharmaceutical and OTC experience spanning over 25 years in the entire value chain, from R&D, operations, sales and marketing, commercial excellence, and general management. Thank you, Milind, for agreeing to be part of this webinar. Over to you, Monica, and look forward to an engaging and insightful learning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vikrant, for the kind introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here talking to this August gathering and talking about Salesforce and the role of the medical rep in the COVID times, as well as how it's going to pan out once we come out of this COVID situation. As Vikrant mentioned, I go a long way in this industry. I actually started my career as a medical rep. So this subject is very close to my heart. And when the OPPI team members approached me to do this session, I was more than happy to do it. So I'll start with sharing my presentation, which I'm going to be talking about the India healthcare scenario currently, and then how COVID has impacted the industry and how we should be moving forward. So just give me a minute while I pull up my presentation. Yeah, can Sorry, can everybody see my screen? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, great. So, so as I mentioned, the topic of my presentation today is the future of field force and the changing role of MR in times of COVID. So the way I will be presenting this data is I'll be first talking about the healthcare sector in India, how it is externally, how the sector is doing. COVID impact on the sentiments of physicians. So, physicians are also human beings like all of us, and they also go through a range of emotions, especially at times like this. And what is the digital adoption at the physician level? We'll also see the COVID impact on the practice of Indian doctors, and this is what Vikrant referred to some time back, where IPSOS has partnered with an online panel company to conduct a survey to find out, how doctors are responding and how they want to interact with pharma companies. And then I have a few slides on the way forward for the industry. So moving ahead, looking at the healthcare scenario in India, the sector overview. So as all of us know, I think you all are a part of this industry, veterans, in this room. You know that there have been decades of neglect that have left India's healthcare system with a very weak arsenal to find and eliminate diseases, especially a disease of the magnitude like COVID. So what we've seen is that India's healthcare infrastructure is already overburdened, and we are actually ill prepared to handle a pandemic like COVID-19. If we look at the hospital beds per thousand population, we are way below some of the developed markets and also some of the newly developing countries. So the number of hospital beds per thousand population is only 0.5 in India. And also, if we look at the number of doctors per thousand population in India, it's again at an abysmally low level of 0.8 for 1,000 population. So as you can see here, we are way below a lot of the countries, in terms of these key healthcare indices. And not just this, even if you look at the government spend on healthcare, we all know that it is at an abysmally low level. At an overall level, it's at the 3.7% of GDP. But if you look at the government spend in that, that's only a 0.9 to a 1%. So all of us know that actually India is a very strong self-pay market, and most of the people in India pay out of pocket. So that's, I think, something that our system is plagued with. Also, if you look at the proportion of all healthcare functions, where is it that our healthcare money is going? So most of it goes in curative care or in buying medicines or in doing diagnostic tests, etc. But a very small proportion of the money is actually spent on preventive care, which also again becomes significant when we are talking of dealing with a disease like COVID. 2020 is where this story has begun, where what we call the earth needs to be healed, and this slide very beautifully depicts that this is a global pandemic, and it is where we all have got together, the whole world has got together to fight this pandemic. So how did it start in India? When did it all begin? I think everybody recollects that 11th of March is the date when WHO declared COVID-19 as a pandemic. And from 25th of March onwards, the India lockdown began. So that was the first lockdown that we had in India. And after that, what we have been seeing is a series of responses and measures by the government of India as well as by the pharmaceutical industry. So we all saw the fact that the PM announced a 15,000 crore package for healthcare. We saw the ICMR allowed private testing labs in India to do COVID testing. Lots of things happened. A lot of pharma industry stood up to this challenge. There are lots of vaccine trials that began with a lot of foreign collaboration. A lot of the pharmaceutical companies started testing their drugs. Pharmaceutical companies, especially based out of India. So all of these things have been happening for the last, 3 months since the COVID pandemic has struck. So let's look at, how this has actually impacted the physician sentiments. What I've pulled up here is the research that has been done by IPSOS, and it's not actually a primary research where we go talking to doctors, but it's what we call crowdsourcing information. So we actually tie up with a company called GMed, which has a panel of global physicians, and you can actually see what are the conversations that are happening amongst physicians. So we have access to those conversations. So that is what I'm going to be talking about. And these conversations have been picked up by doctors who are on this panel globally, including India. So we can see that, even doctors are feeling extremely overwhelmed by this disease and by the quantity of information that is reaching them. There is a lot of fear even amongst doctors as far as they themselves are concerned, and also as far as their families are concerned. So they are sharing a lot of emotive posts, that are kind of, we put into these three buckets. The fact that they're overwhelmed by the information that is there. There are concerns about reduced face-to-face patient communication. And unsafe condition also means that even when physicians are going to work, when they are going to their hospitals, they are going to their clinics, they are also feeling, nervous. They are also feeling scared. So it's not that, the fear and the scare is only amongst people, amongst the population. It's also very much there amongst the doctors, and in fact, even more, because they are the frontline people. They are the people who are facing patients. So what are their concerns? Some of the concerns that they have is that there are vulnerable groups that are there, and you have to put them, help them take care of themselves. So these groups have to get into quarantine, but are they really getting the kind of care that they need? So that is something that the doctors are concerned about. They're also concerned about prescription supply issues, because medicines which are used for treating and managing COVID are constantly in short supply. So that's something that doctors are also concerned about. They're also concerned about their own practice, because it is becoming difficult for them to give appointments. People are not coming to see them. So people who are, the so-called uncontrolled category are actually getting neglected because patients are not coming and meeting doctors. They are not coming to hospitals. So that is something that doctors are extremely concerned about. There is, of course, an anxiety about the unknown consequences of treatment delays. And the other issue that we are seeing globally and also in India are the mental health issues, which are getting triggered by isolation and the stress that this whole, lockdown has caused all of us. But on the other hand, what COVID has also done is that it has necessitated the shift to telehealth. And some of the barriers that, we have seen earlier, that doctors have had in terms of adopting telehealth or technology have been actually reduced thanks to COVID. So, they used to earlier talk about the fact that, they are expensive, or they don't have the resource availability, they don't have the infrastructure. Now, a lot of those barriers are slowly and steadily getting overcome, and doctors are becoming more and more comfortable in the use of technology, like it is with a lot of the other segments in the world. But again, at the same time, telehealth experiences also vary. There are some doctors who are very comfortable, who have adopted it quite well. But there are also doctors who are talking about the fact that they are feeling ill-equipped because they are not sure of the technology. They are worried about the fact that there could be medico-legal considerations. How can they prescribe drugs using tele platforms? So these are some of the barriers that doctors continue to have. They're also concerned of the fact that, the entire ecosystem around them has to be tech enabled. So it's not just that the doctor has to be technologically enabled, but even his patients have to be technologically enabled. So there are a whole host of issues and barriers that doctors still continue to have. However, what we are seeing over time that these barriers are actually on a downturn. IPSOS has also conducted another survey, which was called the Digital Doctor Study, which I think I have been sharing findings of this with a lot of people on this group, which was a 21-country study that was conducted by IPSOS on the digital habits of doctors to understand their attitudes towards digital and connected health, whether they are recommending digital health, do they use the data that patients are bringing with them for making treatment decisions, what kind of channels do they prefer, are they using any digital therapeutics and so on and so forth. So this study actually talked about the fact that, again, and this study was actually done pre-COVID. So this is much before COVID struck. So this study was done somewhere around December 2019 and Jan of 2020, where we saw that even before COVID, doctors had already started adopting digital technologies and telemedicine was getting practiced. So the data that you see here is talking about some global numbers, and what you can see on the right hand side of this graph is talking about the India numbers. So you can see over here that India is as advanced as any of the other countries globally in terms of the adoption and usage of the various tele channels that we have. So all of these parameters actually talk about the fact that India has now started adopting, patient remote monitoring, artificial intelligence, telemedicine, telehealth, the way the world has been adopting. And a lot of these digital technologies are not only being used for professional use, but they're also using it for their personal use. So this box on the right hand side actually talks about the fact that it's not that the doctors are only recommending it to their patients or asking their patients to do it or using it in their professional practice, but they are also using it in their personal practice. And with the advent of technology and the advances in connected health devices such as wearables and sensors, doctors are also now starting to track patients' health remotely. So this is another new trend that we are seeing in the market, where if you see here the study that we had conducted globally and in India in 2017, we saw that doctors had made a beginning in terms of using remote data to track patients' health. This has again in 2020 seen an increase to a much higher percent from 51% to 66%. So connected health recommendations by primary healthcare physicians to patients has gone up in the recent past. So just to summarize, basically we saw that more than half the physicians have experienced telehealth and 27% of them are currently using telehealth tools. 32% of the doctors have actually prescribed a digital therapy to their patients, and the top channels that they are accessing, as far as medical information is concerned, was also discussion with their peers, in-person meetings and email. So these are some of the top channels that physicians are using today. So what is our point of view, IPSOS's point of view on what will change in the future? We do see that there will be an acceleration in long-term technology adoption, and doctors are going to get more and more comfortable working through these issues. We are going to see the development of more innovative policies around us. So whether it comes from the government, whether it comes from the healthcare organizations that are there, there will be more resources that will be allocated to the development of digital and connected healthcare services. And we are also expecting to see a rise in virtual medical channels in the near future. So these are some of the trends that we have picked up, in our surveys. I'll now move on to the crux of my presentation, which is on the impact on the practice of Indian doctors, which was a survey that was conducted by IPSOS in India, and it was a very recent survey that we did. But before I get into this section, Vikrant, are we good to move ahead? Are there any questions so far? Or should I carry on?
No, I think you should carry on, and at the end there would be a question answer session.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I move to this section where we are, as I mentioned, this was a study that we conducted, and being very true to the times, we also conducted an online quantitative survey, and I think it's important for me to also inform this group that even when we do market research studies in the past, we have always been using a lot of face-to-face techniques. When we do quantitative studies, when we do qualitative. Last year we did make a beginning even to conduct research, to go online and do surveys online, but it was a very small step. But what we have seen during COVID in the last 3-4 months is all of the research studies that we are conducting right now for the pharma companies are actually moving digital, and companies have really supported us in conducting online surveys, not just quantitative but also qualitative. So it's not just in the overall pharmaceutical industry or the medical device industry that we are seeing this adoption. Even in an industry like market research, we are seeing a very strong adoption of digital tools and techniques to conduct research. So this particular survey we conducted in partnership with Global Survey, where we got data from 150 healthcare professionals across the top metros and smaller towns. And basically the objective of this survey, as I mentioned, was to understand the doctors' interactions with patients, with pharmaceutical companies and with the medical reps pre, during and post-COVID. So when we talk of pre, during and post, when pre is when, before the lockdown happened, During COVID is when, from the first lockdown until the lockdown has got lifted, which is till last week. And post-COVID is the situation where we are talking about over the next 3 to 6 months, which is, even before the launch of a vaccine. So these are the 3 time frames that we have considered and we have briefed our doctors while collecting this data. And as you can see, the focus of the study is GP. So we've got about 30% of the sample represented GPs and about 70% was specialists. And we had a good mix of the big cities and the small cities as a part of the study. So I'll now get into, without much ado, into the findings of the research. So what are physicians' interactions with patients, over the past few months? So before we even get onto their interactions, we asked physicians on what they thought about the disease and what are the biggest challenges that they have been facing as far as treatments are concerned. So 4 months into the novel coronavirus pandemic, we realized that doctors, like the rest of us, are still unclear whether it is a single outbreak or whether this is going to be a seasonal infection. So there is a lot of confusion. Doctors are not sure. We also asked doctors on, how fast they thought we would overcome, this whole crisis situation and how long it would take. On an average, we got doctors saying that it would take about 11 months for us to really come out of this whole, COVID situation. But of course, there were doctors who thought less than 11 months. So we had about 31% of the doctors saying it would be much faster. At the same time, we had a fifth of the doctors also thinking that it would take at least 1 to 2 years for us to come out of this pandemic. What they thought about, this is what I mentioned earlier, that about 29% of the doctors thought that it will be a single outbreak and about 16% saying it's going to be a seasonal phenomenon, but a good 50% plus were not sure about how it's going to be. Coming to what are the difficulties that they think they are going to be facing in terms of treating their patients, the majority of them thought about starting a new patient on a new therapy was the biggest challenge that they are foreseeing, that they are seeing right now, and they foresee in the near future. They also foresee that switching an existing patient, from one therapy to another therapy is going to be challenging. Keeping the appointments on schedule, getting reimbursed for the consultations that they are doing for their patients, and collecting the consultation fees. These are all some of the challenges that doctors have mentioned, and some of the lesser mentions you can see on the graph here. Okay, moving ahead. So what are the volumes of patients that they have been seeing, pre-COVID, during COVID, and what do they expect post-COVID? So what we can see here is that pre-COVID, doctors talked about seeing an average 216 patients, on a weekly basis, and this is per doctor. So, and these are consultations that they have done both face-to-face as well as remote consultations. This has drastically reduced from 216 to 54 during this COVID period, during the lockdown period, which is the last 3.5 months. And post-COVID, which is until we expect the vaccine to come, they are expecting that the patient volumes will not go back to the original levels. It would be slightly subdued. And what you can see in the pie charts here are the new versus the follow-up patients. So at a pre-COVID situation, they had an equal mix of new patients as well as the follow-up. But during, the lockdown, they saw that the follow-up patients were more and the new patients actually went down substantially. Post-COVID, still they feel that they will see more of the follow-up patients than new patients. Coming to what proportion of their patients were seeing them remotely and what proportion was seeing them face-to-face. So very interesting data here. In the past, which was pre-COVID, 75% of all the consultations that the doctors did was face-to-face, and only about 25% of the consultations was remote. Now, how that 25% was split across them, 13% was actually done by telephone, 7% was done online, and 5% was done via SMS. So this is the breakup that they had pre-COVID. Now let's see how COVID has brought about a change. So even during COVID, we had about 48% of the doctors who mentioned that they did see patients, but a large proportion of them now consulted online. So 52% of the consultations that they have done in the last 3-4 months have been online consultation. And again, majority of those consultations have been telephonic, followed by online and then SMS. Moving ahead, of course, it's not going to go back again to the way it was pre-COVID. So there are some changes. So this 25% of remote is going to become 37%. So even doctors are expecting that in their practice, things are not going to go back to the way they were at pre-COVID levels, and there will be a new normal. And they do expect that the remote consultations with patients are going to increase in the future. Yeah. Okay. Then we also checked with them on what are their views about remote consultations. Do they find them effective? Do they have any challenges? So we had almost 70% of the consultations that were conducted, which were rated at least as or more effective as in-person consultations. So they mentioned that on an average, they had about 12 consultations in a day during this COVID phase. So these were the number of consultations that they were doing on a daily basis. This is an average per doctor. And in terms of the effectiveness, 70% of these they felt were as effective or in fact more effective than doing even a face-to-face consultation. And we also checked with them as to what was the length of the consultation. And on an average, doctors were talking about the fact that each consult lasted anywhere between 15 to 16 minutes. And what we've put here is some of the quotes that the doctors have said. So basically now, doctors are talking about the fact that there are apps, that they have adopted, that they have on their phone, where, they are giving a choice to patients, whether they want to do it, do a consultation. Do they still want to come to the OPD? Do they want to do an SMS consultation, or do they want to do a teleconsultation, which could be either through WhatsApp or some video conference? And typically the SMS consultations they were talking about are free. They are not charged, but the OPD, of course, is charged the way it was normally done. But teleconsult or the WhatsApp consultation comes somewhere in between. They do charge them, but not as much as they used to charge them for the in-person consultations. So that is something that was being said by the doctors. We also got a few concerns on teleconsultation, which was around the medico-legal issues, where they were saying that they were not sure what is going to happen to the prescriptions, that they are writing. Also the fact that, whether they could really prescribe serious drugs, and for prescribing serious drugs, they would definitely need to see patients. So those were some of the concerns that doctors had with teleconsultation. Yeah. So this is as far as the interaction with the patients is concerned. I'll now deep dive into the physician interactions with the pharmaceutical companies and with the medical reps. So what are the HCP expectations from pharmacos during this COVID outbreak? So as we can see that doctors actually expect pharmaceutical companies to deliver business as usual as far as they are concerned. So whether it is in terms of them receiving medical supplies from the pharma companies, or whether the availability of drugs for patients, any kind of patient support programs, they want all of this to continue the way it was, in the past. But of course, a new expectation that we saw come up this time, which we have never seen in the past, is that they want a help from the pharma companies in creating better consultation platforms for doctors to be able to interact with their patients. So this was something which we found very interesting, something new that, doctors are talking about, wanting to interact with pharma companies and becoming enablers in helping them adopt digital technologies. Some of the other mentions that we got were also in terms of, some drugs which were in short supply, which all of us know, hydroxychloroquine, which was out of stock for some time. They talked about the fact that these drugs should be available. Companies should reduce price of drugs, which is always a finding of research where doctors want drug prices to be reduced. Also in terms of manufacturing PPEs, improving the efficiency of the supply chain, and so on and so forth. They also want some education programs to be run on COVID. That is also their expectation from pharma companies. So what is their preferred mode of interaction? So again, this is something we captured in 3 phases. One was pre-COVID, the other was during COVID, and the last, of course, is post-COVID. So the way we asked this question was that prior to COVID, what were their most preferred modes of interaction with the pharma companies? So we asked them to rank it as top 1 and 2. So here, not surprisingly, we got medical reps, which was 40% of the doctors ranked it either a 1 or a 2 in terms of their preferred mode of interactions with pharma companies. And then we also got WhatsApp with 30% of the doctors mentioning that. And then we had conferences, telephonic detailing, e-details, etc. This is all pre-COVID. Now let's look at what happened during COVID. The preference for medical rep visits actually went down drastically, and not surprising. From a 40%, about 15% of the doctors talked about the medical rep visits being preferred. But what went up during this stage is the telephonic detailing. So 41% of the doctors said that that was their preferred mode of interaction with the medical reps during the time of COVID. So the top 3 modes that we saw during COVID was telephonic detailing, followed by WhatsApp, and then the e-details that were being done by companies. And what do they expect post-COVID? Again, the medical reps are back. So they do expect that the medical reps will be back, and they will be the preferred mode of interaction, followed by WhatsApp, telephonic detailing, and also another area where we saw a jump from 17%, which was pre-COVID. This actually went up to 24%. So e-detail or telephonic detailing, audio calls, video calls is also something that the doctors are now, starting to prefer post-COVID. Yeah. Okay, so remote detailing opinion now, what do they think about it? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? We saw that, doctors were pretty comfortable with remote detailing, contrary to some of the hypotheses that, I've been discussing with clients. They find it very convenient. In fact, on a scale of 1 to 5, where we were talking about it being very effective to not at all effective, we saw that we got a score of 3.8, which is a really good score. And 72% of the doctors consider remote detailing to be effective. What did they like about it? They felt it was convenient. It can happen at the convenience of their homes. They can take it wherever they want. They can read the materials later, so they could kind of preserve it and go back to it, refer to it later. They can schedule it at a time that's convenient to them, and it doesn't impact their practice hours. So there's no interruption in their day-to-day practice and seeing of patients. But on the other hand, we also had, some of the dislikes. Connectivity, as all of us know, at times fails us. So that was something that doctors talked about, the fact that especially when there are video detailing sessions, they did find it challenging. They found that there was no in-person interaction. Now, this was again something very interesting, and they felt that they were losing out on that personal touch. They do want to be visited by reps. They don't want a complete remote detailing model, because that kind of doesn't give them an opportunity to interact with people. And of course, they also felt that it was a bit inflexible. The fact that they could not stop the detailing, which in a face-to-face they can actually tell the person to stop detailing, whereas over here, if they've given a time, then they do stick to that time, which I think is a good thing. But yeah, as far as the doctors are concerned, they felt that it was a challenge, and they felt that it took longer than in-person detailing. So what are the different remote detailing experiences that they had, and what is it that pharma companies have done during these remote detailing sessions? So sales brochures and videos seem to be top of the charts in terms of what companies have been doing with doctors, with almost 55-56% talking about it. Also, they talked about the fact that there were clinical trial data was discussed. There were journal articles that were discussed, and then of course the typical detailing talking about competitive products, educational videos, and so on and so forth. So this slide, I'll just quickly jump, because this is just talking about the remote detailing mechanics, how doctors are adapting. So who approached them, whether it was the medical rep who approached them for doing the e-detailing, was it with the same rep who was visiting them? And we saw that yes, 95% of the remote detailing sessions are actually happening with the same rep, who was visiting the doctor. Where did they have it? In fact, 73% of the doctors mentioned they had it in their place of practice, vis-a-vis 27% saying they had it at home. When did it take place? Mostly it looks like majority of them had it in the afternoon between 12 and 5. How long was it? Ranged anywhere between 5 minutes to 30 minutes. And did they receive samples post the session? Majority of the doctors talked about yes, getting samples at the end of the sessions, which were couriered to them post the remote detailing session. This is just some of the content that doctors gave us, some of the open-ended questions that we asked them in terms of what all did the doctors say in terms of remote detailing. So they were pretty happy with the content that was shared, by the companies. They felt it was well designed. They felt the reps and people over the call were really professional. They were well prepared. It was convenient. They got co-browsing facilities while talking on the phone. The technology was easy, etc., etc. So you can see some of the mentions by the doctors. Okay, we also asked them a question on which companies do they recollect in terms of the remote detailing feedback. So lots of companies came up. I mean, I would say that I think we got practically all of the companies being mentioned here. But of course, there were some which had more mentions, some which had lesser mentions. And let me tell you that this data is, of course, at an aggregate level. It's at an overall level. And these numbers will change if you look at it by specialities versus the general physicians, or if we look at it by, metro cities versus the smaller town class. So the data will, of course, look different. But at an overall level, we saw that, doctors recollected Cipla, Sun Pharma, Mankind, Abbott, and some of the other lesser mentions also included companies like Novartis, Glenmark, Pfizer, etc. So as far as the future detailing model, so post-COVID, what is it that the doctors, how would they want to interact with companies? We got almost 95% of the doctors saying that they would prefer, a face-to-face model. They would want to continue with the medical reps, and only 5% of the doctors said that they would prefer an only remote consulting model and a remote detailing model or a remote interaction model and no face-to-face interaction. And then we also went one step ahead and asked them that when they want to interact with the medical reps, how do they want that interaction to happen? So 63% of the times they want the interaction to be face-to-face, but 21% of the times they said they wanted to be on the phone, and 16% of the times they wanted it to be online. So in fact, some of the doctors even went to the extent to tell us that, typically a medical rep comes to us, say, twice a month, but the way that should pan out is in future, the same rep should come once a month, and the second call that he would have done face-to-face should now be changed to a virtual call. So actually, we thought that that was a good opportunity for pharma companies to do a great deal of capacity building, because your reps are now not needed, at least as far as the doctors are concerned, to be going as frequently as they were going in the pre-COVID situation. So what do they think are the changing expectations of the role of the MRs? So MRs are definitely here to stay. Doctors feel that they are important. They want their in-person visits to continue post-COVID, but at the same time, they do expect that the role of the MRs should be evolving as we get into the post-COVID scenarios. So they do find them important. They want them to continue. They should evolve from their role. They should become like relationship managers. They should become like scientific officers. They should be able to have high quality, discussions with the doctors. So that is certainly the expectations that pharma companies have from the MRs. And they do want them to wear multiple hats, as I talked earlier. They want them to facilitate interactions between doctors and patients. They want them to be the go-between and, help them in the apps that have been installed. They want the same person to be doing the telephonic detailing as well to them. They want them to support them in their patient support programs. So the whole role of the medical rep, as far as the doctor is concerned, is now being perceived to be changed post the COVID scenario. So so I've almost come to the end of my presentation, and I think this is a time for us to pause, reflect, and reorient. And I just found this very interesting quote by Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, where he said, the last 2 years, the kind of digital transformation that we have seen in 2 months is even more than what we saw in the last 2 years. And I think all of us have been experiencing that in our respective businesses and in our lives. So, just as a summary, kind of drawn a pen portrait of the digitally savvy HCP. So the HCP today is an even more transformed and individual and connected like never before. They expect pharma companies to play a hand-holding role in enabling this whole digital transformation in their life. But at the same time, they still prefer a face-to-face engagement with the field force, though they do want the field force also to increasingly adopt a remote interaction. They want the medical reps to provide a scientific understanding of drugs, given the whole medico-legal complexity in the current scenario. What is the role for pharma next, for the pharma companies? Pharma companies need to really push the digital transformation agenda very strongly. The way markets today are segmented have to be very different from the way we have been segmenting them in the past. So not look at it by just town classes or by specialities or by juniors or seniors, but by looking at the digital maturity of the respondent and formulate the strategies accordingly. They also want the pharma companies also need to be a bridge between the app companies or the technology companies and the doctors. So it's very easy for the doctors to even reach out to tech companies, but they still have that. They still need the pharma companies because they think pharma companies understand them better. So the role of pharma companies now in being a tech provider, whether they have their own technology that they want to provide, or whether they partner with tech companies, is something that is definitely expected by doctors from the pharmacos. And this whole patient journey, which we've been seeing in the past, is also undergoing a change today, as to how patients are going through their whole treatment process. So companies also need to understand this whole changing patient journey dynamics and see where they can intervene as far as diagnosis, treatment, and compliance is concerned. Lastly, the role of the medical rep, as I talked earlier, has to be reinvented to become a value-adding partner and not just have a transactional relationship. The medical rep now has to really reskill and upskill to become conversant with technology and knowledge, reorient to balance. He has to be able to balance the face-to-face as well as the remote detailing, and he needs to be able to facilitate better treatment outcomes along with the doctor. So basically a partnership role. Just my last slide, which is in sum. So COVID-19 has now allowed pharma companies to rethink and realign their expectations from the sales force. And I think all of these points I have talked about earlier. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patient listening. And I'm now open to any questions.
So thank you very much. What an amazing session. A lot of interesting finding, and I'm sure the participants will find this very, very interesting and insightful, especially for taking forward their strategy towards HCP engagement. Thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. We have lots of questions which I could pick up from the the panel, which is question and panel which is throwing up questions. Let me start by the first one. As doctors are adopting teleconsultations and telemedicine, what are the challenges they are facing in telemedicine?
Okay. Yeah, so I think I did talk about some of these. So while they are comfortable now, they are kind of adopting technology and they are getting some of the good tools that they can use. But I think what we also heard them saying is that there are some of the medico-legal concerns, that they feel are not addressed yet. Also, the fact that when they are practicing telemedicine, some of the guidelines that have come today are just talking about very symptomatic treatment. So, for example, they can give a paracetamol, they can give an anti-allergy drug. Some of the basic drugs is something that can be given, but serious prescriptions, for chronic therapies, etc., is still not allowed to be prescribed. So they are concerned about how they can do that through telemedicine. They are concerned about uploading prescriptions because they are worried about how their prescription is going to get used by patients and maybe by the app providers. So what we also got a sense was that there were a lot of challenges that doctors were having with the app companies, because they felt that through the app companies, they were getting access to the patient's data, and they could influence the drugs that were reaching patients. They could influence the labs that the patients were going to, and so on and so forth. So these were some of the concerns that we saw that doctors were facing with telemedicine.
Thank you. There is also, how much of time a doctor would be willing to give for e-detailing, and typically with this kind of a change, what do you expect the average call averages of reps going onwards for the pharma company?
Okay, so I don't think we can compare the detailing that we are doing today, the brand detailing, to be the same when we are doing a remote detailing. So of course the whole model has to change. Today the way it's done is we have a detail aid, we open the pages, we are reading out brand stories, we are showing them a visual, and that's how it is done today. But in the future, what the doctors are expecting, that They don't want the typical detailing stories. What they want is the rep to have meaningful conversations with them. So talk to them about, what are the new developments in the market, about the new drugs that are coming up. Right now, of course, COVID is a hot topic. So many of them said that they want to keep receiving COVID related information in terms of what are the developments on vaccines front, therapy front. So those are the kind of information that they want. They want to hear about, what kind of programs are coming out, the symposia that companies are arranging, the CME programs. They want to hear speakers. So the role of a medical rep, they want actually to start talking about these things rather than only talk about brand stories. So while they are talking today that they have spent about 12 to 15 minutes when they are doing this remote detailing, but I think a very small part of that is going to be on brand talk. More of that is going to be around scientific discussion.
Yeah. Another interesting question. Any thoughts on which markets and specialty we find that they are, the doctors are digitally more mature or ready to adopt compared to the others?
Right. Yeah. So we did get that as a part of our survey. So typically, as expected, we saw that the metro market. So if you look at cities like, and I can of course comment only on the cities that we've gone to for our research, we did see that there is a very strong metro skew in terms of their adoption of technology and also the comfort that they have with online methodologies. Some of the smaller cities also we saw, and I think come back, I'll have to just take a look. There were blips, there were some of the smaller cities which looked quite good. Like for example, Cochin, I remember, looked higher as compared to the other smaller cities that we've taken. So there are ups and downs, and I can share that data maybe after this call.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's another interesting question from an operations standpoint. Have you done any work on how do you approach doctor for asking an appointment on e-detailing?
So I think here it was through the survey that we did. In fact, that was one of the questions that we asked. So in fact, surprisingly, we saw that even doctors have reached out to medical reps to do an e-detailing. In fact, I showed that slide. I'm not sure if I highlighted that number, but we saw that 25% of the doctors have proactively reached out to the reps and said, can you take me through your products or can you do a detailing, which was very interesting, I thought. And typically we always believe that doctors shy away from detailing. They don't want to hear it. But here we saw that 25% doctors reached out to the reps and asked them to do a detailing. 75% of the doctors, of course, said that they were reached out. And most of them heard from the reps. I think of that 75%, 80%, I think the reps arranged the detailing session. And I didn't see any of the doctors giving any negatives on that I was irritated or I didn't want to do the e-detailing session. I think they give them a time and then they stick to that time. Of course, I'm sure there may be instances where detailing sessions are cancelled and postponed and all that, but I didn't see doctors be negative about giving time for a detailed session.
So another interesting question. With telemedicine coming in, the territories of medical reps could get more diffused, and the lines would blur out. So, how do you make out that, the efforts of telemedicine are converting into prescriptions for that particular rep?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, I think, and that's the holy grail of marketing, because I think that question has always been there, not just now because they are doing teleconsultation or telemedicine, but there are other ways also that drugs and brands are promoted to doctors. So promotions are also happening at the pharmacy level. They are also happening through CME programs. So it always boils down to which of these channels is the most efficient channel and what can you attribute to each of the channels that are actually promoting the product. So again, I would go back to say that in research, then because I am from this industry, we do have models, we have tools that we use. And in fact, IPSOS has a very interesting tool called Channel Vision, where we can actually see that when a brand is getting promoted or a brand is getting adopted by a doctor, what is the channel that has been responsible for that adoption. So whether it has been actually the rep effort, has it been something at the pharmacy level, has it been some online initiative that has happened. So there are ways of arriving at ROIs, arriving at knowing which of the channels has actually played a bigger role.
Have you found any difference in the teleconsultation approach from Metro 1 and Tier 1 and the Tier 2 or Tier 3 towns?
Not so much. Actually, we dug deep into the data to see whether there are any major differences, and we realized that they are not, which actually also encouraged us to think that, this is a very good way for pharma companies and for medical reps to now even reach out to people in the lower town classes. Because we did realize that, doctors in the lower town classes were also quite digitally savvy, and they also have experienced tele-detailing. So we didn't see that in the metros there was more of tele-detailing happening as compared to the non-metros. So we did see that, across cities and across town classes, the adoption was quite strong and almost equal.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at the numbers. I can share the specific numbers post this call.
Sure. Monica, maybe, because of the paucity of time, we will take 2 more questions because there are plenty of questions which are coming in. And okay. I request all the participants to keep do writing the questions, because we promise you that, we will share all these questions with our presenter, Ms. Monica Gangwani today. And then, you can expect answers on some of those, very clearly. So let the questions do flow. But yeah, because of paucity of time, we will take 2 more questions. But one of the question, the second last I would say is, typically how many doctors are, getting bogged down with a bombardment of webinars and Zoom meetings and e-detailing? So how are they coping with these kind of digital platforms?
Yeah, it is a challenge, I think, and it's pretty much the same with all of us. I think ever since COVID has happened and all of us have started working from home, we have definitely seen an increase in the number of, these web sessions. But I think everybody has been coping with it. We didn't see it anything different with doctors. In fact, I think they also talked about the fact that it is now stabilizing. So, when the issue had started, say 3 months back, the first, I think 1 or 2 months, what had happened with doctors is that suddenly they saw their practice going down. So a lot of doctors, could not go to their clinics, they couldn't visit hospitals. Suddenly they were also forced to work from home. So at that situation, I think the fact that these webinars and these detailing sessions had just kind of starting to pick up, they were able to cope with it, because they were much freer than what they were in the past. They were in the confines of their home, so they could do it. And now again, I think they are trying to strike a balance between their patients, because now a lot of doctors have opened up. They've started going to their clinics, though many of them talked about the fact that they don't go full day. So earlier they would go morning and evening. Now they've chosen one time. So either they go in the morning or they go in the evening. The other slot is kept for tele consultation. So they alternate, so when they're seeing patients, they're not able to attend webinars, and the evening time is kept for doing, the webinars, or vice versa. So I think, yeah, initially they did talk about being overwhelmed, but I think they coped. I don't think there were much concerns.
And with that, I come to the last question of the session, Monica, and that is, what are the top 3 skills that you would recommend to the pharma companies for the MRs to now adopt, given the situation has changed so much in the last 2-3 months?
Yeah, great. I think the presentation that that I shared, in fact, led to that. So as I said, initially the role of the MR was detailing, selling, I think over time, and I was having this discussion with KG, I think offline, and he was talking about the fact that, initially MRs were actually, very scientific in approach. There was proper detailing, and then somehow the role kind of changed to becoming more sales oriented. And now it looks like, the industry needs to go back to creating that whole persona of the MR to be a very strong scientific, person. So yeah, so one, I think the top quality that the MR should have is that, yes, he should be extremely knowledgeable about drugs, about the scientific information, about the clinical trial data that he's talking about. So firstly, the knowledge that he has. 2, I think this whole digital thing that we are talking about, he also has to be himself digitally savvy. He has to be able to help the doctor in this whole digital piece. So he has to be an advisor, he has to be a guide, he has to help them download apps. He has to tell them how to use those apps. So that's the second expectation from him. And third, I would say, is helping the doctor in dealing with their patients. Because I think right now doctors are also finding it quite challenging, dealing with patients. So they want the MRs to assist them in all these patient support programs and helping them in managing their patients. So I think these are the three top, in my view, that companies should be focusing on.
Thank you, Monica. It was a wonderful session, and thank you for all your insights that you have shared in this session. Just to share with you that when we were looking at the number of questions in the last 15 minutes, we have recorded almost 112 questions that have come.
So a lot of work
so that speaks about the interest that you have invoked in our participants. So again, a wonderful session. With this, I invite now the Secretary General of Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance, Mr. Sudarshan Jain, to give his closing remarks. And may I welcome Mr. Sudarshan Jain. Over to you, Mr. Jain.
Well, first we start with Tara. Tara, you will start? Yeah, Tara is the Secretary General of IDMA. We can start with Tara and then I can take over. Over to you, Tara.
Right. Thank you very much. I must thank OPPI. What a wonderful session. A lot of learning, a lot of unlearning. Monica, you were really very good. It was a very detailed and well-researched presentation, I must say. And there are quite a few excellent take-homes you have given all of us. I'm sure, as Prashant said, as Milind said, that you've got 100+ questions, and I think till the next lockdown, you will have to keep answering these questions from home or from wherever you're operating.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think some great, excellent take-homes I feel are that MRs are there to remain, come what may, whether you go digitally savvy or you do hand-holding of doctors directly as pharma companies, but MRs are there to remain. And we need to now know how we enhance their role, these MRs. That's going to be very interesting. And you also took us through what is the immediate future plan and what are the long-term plans we have for the MRs and the companies in order to ensure that our products are well marketed and well sold. I'm really impressed with the presentation, and I must thank OPPI for the wonderful webinar, and this is what they've been doing over the last couple of months. I must thank Anand and Sudarshan for the excellent support, and of course IDMA. I want to thank Vikrant for the very good setting of the tone for today's webinar, and Milind for the brilliantly moderated question answer session. I want to thank OPPI and all its staff, including Bhavna, for facilitating today's webinar, and the wonderful presentation you made, Monica. So thank you very much. And what is impressing is that the pause, reflect, and reoriented that you told us about. And I think this message should go to all the pharma companies, because we need to work as a team now. The pharma companies, the doctors, and the MRs. We need to work together to see that the pharma companies take best advantage of this situation today. So thank you once again, Anand, especially for this wonderful opportunity. All the best, and let's stay in touch. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Tara, and I will echo what Tara has said. Thanks to OPPI leadership team for the outstanding initiative. KG, Sharad, Satya, Bhavna, Nitika, Prabha, everyone, all of you made it happen. And it is a lot of work, but thank you tremendously for this. We started this series with supply chain. I distinctly remember, KG, yes. And it has been a great education for me. I've been attending most of these seminars. Outstanding education and very inspiring one. And today it was great to hear Vikrant setting the tone for this seminar. And as always, Vikrant get to the basics, which he did, and set the tone. Monica, I'm a great fan of research and the insights which you brought to the seminar, very, very useful for thinking out of the box. And Milind, always he gets different kind of thinking. The way he moderated the session was just outstanding. And it has been such a great education at personal level and all of you who have been attending the seminar. The whole series have been part of the complete value chain, right from manufacturing, KG, and ending today with field force. And if I will like to say at this moment, all of us in the Indian industry can be proud of the fact KG has been part of great discussion with the government. Tara has been part of the discussion. Compared to other industries, we have fared very well. There is no reported shortages. And I would like to thank at this moment all people in the value chain, right from manufacturing, channel partners, and now in the field. And there the primary roles come, which KG said right in the beginning, and Monica reinforced in our personal discussion, that now knowledge will be the king, and the role of the field force will be converting science into care. All the very best. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'd like to thank everyone for this seminar. Thank you.
KG, you are mute.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sudarshan, Dara, and I think this whole knowledge series that we conducted has been a very good example of collaboration. A collaboration with IPA, IDMA, as the entire industry we came together to really roll out this knowledge series, which started on April 29, and today is the last one that we are having, at least in this particular period of knowledge series. And as Sudarshan rightly mentioned, we started off with supply chain because at that point in time, that was the real burning topic for us, because supply chain was disrupted and we were wondering how things are going to move. But thanks to the session that we had with Dhaval Butch, who was extraordinary, and I think we learned a lot. But fortunately, as Sudarshan mentioned, I think in the last 2-3 months, the industry managed supply chain brilliantly. We in fact kept the promise that we made to the Prime Minister that we will ensure supplies will not be disrupted. So thanks to every one of you, whether it is IPA, IDMA, OPPI colleagues, and finally our field colleagues, because they are at the front, and they ensure that the products are available. So my sincere thanks to every single field colleague and also our manufacturing colleagues. Despite all the challenges, we worked together and made it happen. From there, we actually shifted gear, and then we had a wonderful partnership with Corn Ferry, who did 2 brilliant, webinars. One was on leadership, and the other one was on reskilling. I think that again helped us to think through as to how do we need to manage in a situation like this, as well as post-COVID. And then we had the Bain and Company that brought in an extraordinary insight into consumer behavior, what is happening in terms of patients, in terms of doctors. And that was again a very good, learning opportunity for us. Then we had IQVIA, which came in and talked to us about digital marketing, how this is going to become, the future, in terms of marketing. And then we had, of course, IPSOS. Today, talking about what's going to be the future of our field force. And in between, we also had Havas coming to us and talking to us about tele-detailing and telemedicine. Yeah. I think overall, we had thought through and delivered on a very systematic approach of areas where I think our colleagues around the industry need to get a little bit more educated, little bit more knowledgeable about how do we need to run in this post-COVID scenario. And, Monica, first of all, thanks to you for a brilliant presentation today. It was extraordinary because I think everybody was wanting to really know that how is the field force going to be managed, and I think you laid out that extremely well. One thing that also, really struck me was that with so many webinars, with so many tele-detailing, there is probably an overload, but fortunately, what we realized in these industry webinars, that every single webinar, the number of participants has gone up. Today, our participation is close to 350 participants as we speak who have attended this session. So fortunately, I don't think our seminars or webinars were boring. I think they found it interesting, and that's the reason why they continue to participate in this. I would also like to really take this opportunity to thank Bhavana and her team, who is the senior director, for really spearheading and ensuring that these webinars happen in a very seamless manner every Tuesday. And also thanks to Nitika, who helped in actually managing two of the key webinars on telemedicine as well as digital marketing. I'll be failing if I do not, thank the backend. There are people who are not in the camera, but who are there behind and trying to make it happen, like Shreyas, Amanat, Carolina, Prem, Masood, and also Prabha, Clara. These are all people, who have really helped us. And from our intelligent team, Alpesh, Suraj, who have ensured that these webinars, are technically happening in the right way. And my special thanks to my two dear friends, both Dara and Sudarshan, because it is with their involvement we discussed, we debated what should be the topics, what should be done, and that's how one could really roll out such an extraordinary knowledge series. So thanks Sudarshan, thanks Dara for your collaborative approach. And finally, I would like to thank every one of the participants here for your extraordinary support. And Vikrant, Milind, thanks to you, my friend, for really leading it today, because it's not very easy. Many of our EC members, whether it was Raja, Vikrant, Milind, Satya, Suresh, everybody came out of their regular schedules and participated. They chaired it, they moderated the session, and and they made it a real big success. Sarthak, Manoj, Ashwini, then Anand, all of them, they participated in this session pretty well from the EC team. So we hope that you all enjoyed these webinars, and we been putting it in as interesting a manner as possible. So till we meet again, stay healthy, stay safe, and goodbye. Thank you so much. Appreciate.
Thank you very much. All the best. Thank you. God bless. Stay well, all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks, Monica.
Thanks. Bye.